Warm welcome to Edrevel's webinar on bringing AI to learning and development. With reports indicating that companies are increasingly reorienting their businesses around upskilling and workforce agility, this conversation couldn't be more timely. So at Edrevel, we've been focused on helping organizations move beyond outdated training models with AI native tools that personalize learning, support employees in real time, and drive measurable outcomes. I'm joined today by Paul, Sudhanshu, and Rebecca, who will walk us through key insights, real examples, and what's possible when AI meets learning and development. To get us started, I'll hand it over to Rebecca. Rebecca, over to you.
Hi, thank you, Nikki, and good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to all of you who are attending today, and we're so glad to have you with us. And as Nikki rightly put it, this session is on AI-powered learning and future readiness, a topic that's become more and more central as organizations look for smarter, more accessible ways to train, upskill, and retain their teams. Can we go to the next slide? So this conversation is exciting as we head into the 2025 International Conference on Talent Development, ATD 25. There's a clear shift happening in our field from delivering learning to proving its impact. So we are excited to be part of that dialogue, both here today and in person next month. So if you're attending, we'll be at booth 2047, and we also have a bunch of free passes to the expo. So if you'd like to come, just shoot us an email at hello@edrevel.com, and we'll be happy to set you up. And we hope to see you all there in a few weeks. So if you can go to the next slide. So before we dive into, how Edrevel works, and we would like to step back, look at the broader picture, what's breaking down in L&D, and more importantly, why. So the reality of the world work is changing fast, between technological disruption, global uncertainty, and shifting workforce dynamics. Learning teams are being asked to keep up and in many cases lead through all this change that's happening. So as you see here in the Future of Jobs report 2025, highlights this clearly. Across 55 economies, 63% of employees and employers say skill gaps are now the biggest barrier to business transformations. That's huge. But that's the challenge doesn't stop there. Engagement is slipping with learners. Only 30% of managers and 23% of employees feel connected to their learning, which means even when training is delivered, it's not always translating into real impact. And speaking of impact, most teams still struggle to show it. While nearly every organization tracks what's being done, only 4% are measuring ROI, and 8% are capturing actual learning outcomes. That's very low. Meanwhile, business leaders are expecting those numbers and often assuming they already exist. So that's the state we are in globally at the moment. So, which is not great, and we want to improve. So how do we begin to solve this? It starts by rethinking how learning is delivered, how it adapts in real time, and how it connects directly to growth. So at Edrevel, we've built our platform around the pillars designed to address exactly what you see on this slide. So our Skills Pro, this engine connects individual growth to organizational insights. So learning isn't just tracked, it's translated into performance data that matters with our recommended learning paths. And then our AI native course creation and assessment makes it possible in today's world to build and adapt future-ready training in minutes, not months, with instant module setup aligned to roles, teams, and evolving needs. And our live insights takes you from data to decisions, giving L&D leaders the visibility to track ROI. We definitely want to up the percentage of tracking ROI there and identify gaps and take action all in real time. So these are not standalone features at Edrevel. They work together to move learning and development from reactive to being proactive and ready. So, and now I'll hand it over to Paul to show you exactly how this comes to life. Paul?
Thanks so much, Rebecca. Thanks for that great setup and industry insight. As I think we think about impact and making impact, and then working backwards from that, right? So where are the results? We're focused on three things, which is how do you develop skills in the workforce? How do you use AI to speed that up and do that at scale? And then how do you use the data to generate the insights and also to personalize the learning? So we're going to take a little look at that now. So we're thinking about three things. How do you actualize impact? How do you help develop skills? How do you leverage the AI? And then how do you use data to drive personalization? We're thinking of three things here at Edrevel. The first is bringing AI to learning. So the biggest challenge in the industry with this incredible technology that we have called AI is that in many cases you have to go to it. What we're looking at is bringing the AI into the learning, so it's embedded in the learner process, and we innovate with AI in the learner experience. So the learner experience is online, in digital, in face-to-face. You know, they've been designed over years, generations, you know, even centuries. And the business of learning is the place where learning takes place. So bringing AI into that so that it's working to the service of learning and education is what we're focused on. This overcomes the challenge of having to go to the AI and somehow work with AI outside of your learning context, which is really what's happening with many people when they use the common tools out there like ChatGPT and so on. They're great personal tools, but they're not embedded into the learning process itself. So that's the first thing we're focused on, and the innovation that we're bringing to help learning change. The second thing is thinking about the whole learner process. So when you think about learner engagement from their initial, for example, enrollment on a course, or they might be paying for a course, or they might be in the workplace taking a course. There's that first step of onboarding and registration, and then through content, through assessment, through diagnosis of skills gaps, through reassessment, and into those final processes of things like certification and badging. We're thinking about that entire life cycle and innovating through that entire life cycle. And then the last thing we're doing is thinking about how you leverage AI in the learner process through the entire life cycle on a custom solution approach. And what we mean by that is that every organization, every institution, every company has an approach that's unique, and no one size fits all. And particularly in the environment where AI can tailor things so closely to personal need, to company need, our approach is to think through how you can adapt the technologies to the not only individual learners' needs, but to companies' needs, the organization's needs, and make it work for them rather than asking them to kind of fit themselves into a box that you've designed. So bringing AI to learning comprehensively with this custom approach is how we're thinking about transforming L&D. So let's talk about impact. And Rebecca, I think that's the topic for this this webinar today, but it's also really the thing that everybody is tasked with in business. And across the board, demonstrating impact means that you are strategic. If you struggle to demonstrate impact, you're often seen as a cost center, you're seen as tactical, you're seen as non-essential. And so the folks that can demonstrate the impact are the folks who will have strategic success. And what do we mean by that? What do we mean by demonstrating impact? Well, it's showing business results, it's showing quantifiable um, change within your business through the process of training and learning and development. So we're going to talk for a moment about Britannia, which is a large manufacturing organization. They have a global footprint. They are mainly in food and dairy production. They have large manufacturing plants and processes. And what's super key and important is the skills development of their employees in a timely way, but also the reskilling of those employees, because things are changing so fast, not only in terms of product, but also in the way that products are manufactured, particularly with the use of new technologies and AI. So Britannia had a process, which was really an annual process, a competency-based training for thousands of employees. And it used to take them 10 weeks. But through a training scheme that we developed in partnership with them, they've reduced that learner life cycle from 10 weeks to 20 days. That's an incredible impact. What used to take months and weeks is now just taking days. And that's resulting in a business impact of 288 hours solved over that time, 288 hours saved over that time scale, and about 250,000 across 18 factories. And this, I'm happy to say, is actually just the pilot phase. So those kind of savings, both in terms of time and in terms of revenue, have just been in the initial pilot. And what we're excited about is the scaling of this across those 18 factories to all of the workforce going forward. And what does that solution look like? Well, first of all, it's a kiosk-based. You can see the picture on the right there. It's a kiosk-based training. So it's literally on the job. It's at point of work. These are not people who are spending time having to go back to a classroom or being taken out of the workplace to go to a different place of learning. The learning brought to the worker. It's a kiosk-based learning, competency-based assessment. We use biometrics to give quick access. So in this case, it's fingerprint or retina. And what that allows you to do really is get over simple barriers, things like password, remembering passwords, and so on. There isn't time for any of that whilst the manufacturing line is working, is producing stuff, and people need to get trained fast. So using kiosk delivery in place of work with biometrics overcomes so many barriers and reduces time to training and time to completion incredibly. And most of all, and most importantly, improves the quality of the manufacturing process itself, because with the upskilling that can take place quickly and in place of work, that ultimately leads to better output and better manufacturing quality. So as I said, this whole cycle, and this is really, really important, we all learn through feedback. And if you can increase the feedback and decrease the time to feedback, you can speed up learning. And what we've seen here with Britannia is this one pilot has increased their competency assessment from annual to quarterly. So they're now assessing 4 times a year instead of once a year. It replaces manual tools like Excel spreadsheets and manual follow-up through, managers to workers. So all of those processes are out. Automation is in, and their feedback cycle has increased dramatically because of that, and workers are able to get training where they need it, when they need it, improve quality and output. So thinking about the impact there, that's an actual example. What's the model that's underlying this? So with AI and learning development, we're going through this huge transformation where AI can essentially automate many, many processes that used to be manual, where AI can support the learner and can personalize in ways that we haven't seen before. Essentially taking out a lot of heavy lifting and essentially allowing you to get to the gaps in the skills a lot quicker, and then deliver the training against those gaps a lot quicker. So we've shown this model before. This is there's plenty of frameworks out there in the industry. This is one from Josh Bersin. It's a very neat type framework. It shows some of the ways in which AI is being applied to traditional processes to speed them up, and to help scale and to do things much quicker, and overcome many barriers that existed with traditional training. And really, this model, it breaks down into there's three groupings here. There's the generation of content, whether that's taking legacy content and transforming it with AI, or whether it's generating new content. There's the second piece, which is personalizing that content and to learn a need and to learn pathways. And then thirdly, assisting the learner as they move through their learning. So these individual breakdowns into content types, into personalization types, and into learner assistance. We'll see how we're thinking about that in Edrevel now. So three areas: generating content, and generally what AI is able to do is transform content or generate new content in minutes rather than months. Personalize and recommend. Now, we've had personalization for a long, long time, particularly with digital technologies, but ultimately personalization has really still been a one-size-fits-all game. So personalization has been, we're able to tailor stuff to an extent, but a learning cohort still really goes through the same stuff together. And it's still a top-down model. Well, what AI does is flip that entire model and give you the true possibility of being able to figure out where a learner is and then generate content and learner personalization on the fly to them in that moment and to help them. And we'll see a few examples of that in a sec. And then the third dimension of what we've seen with the Josh Bersin model is that learner assistance. So being able to recommend stuff, but then also being able to assist the learner with things like questions, whether that's questions in their training or questions on the job. And we'll see a little bit later how there's a couple of use cases we're supporting with AI where we're helping learners learn new stuff, but then also helping them whilst they're on a job with questions they might not be able to answer and helping them answer those questions in real time. So generating content, personalizing and recommending, and learning assistance all through AI. So I'm going to pass to my colleague Sudhanshu. He's going to talk through those three use cases, those three capabilities of AI in learning, embedded in the learning with some practical examples. Over to you, Sudhanshu.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Rebecca, for that great introduction. Thank you, Paul, for that great breakdown on the framework and the use cases in the industry as well. So far, what we've shared is pain points in the industry, issues that are faced between several industry leaders, and we also shared the framework on how we are tackling these issues as well. Well, let's see how it looks exactly in the platform itself. As Paul mentioned initially, was generating content. So what we're seeing here is step one of generating the content, utilizing AI in our system. Just like Paul mentioned, several tools are out there to help you generate content with AI. However, you have to go to them. What we're seeing here is exactly in our platform, right, ready for you to use for your day-to-day and to develop content for your institution. So what we're seeing here is step one of the AI content generator. What the user is using is utilizing a template that's fixed for their content. What you're seeing is 4 different templates that we have available. One is a speed flex, one is skill master, one is nano learn, and one is custom. All these really break down to is the duration of the course. If the course breaks down to a few weeks long, if it's a few minutes introductory pilot level course, or if it's a few hour long course, you would select each template respectively. Additionally, you can customize the template to exactly how you want to output your content, and we'll take a look at that as well. Additional step in the AI content generator. This would be step 2. Once I determine which template works best for me and which time frame I want to generate my content in, I will want to begin generating the content itself. This essentially is infinite amount of content generation. You have the option to upload any sort of foundational documents for your course, whether it's a training outline, whether it's a syllabus, whether it's a step-by-step procedure, or any sort of relevant documents to your course. In addition to the documents that you upload, you have a text box, as you can see here, that you're able to expand on certain areas of the content generation. What you see here is this quick one-liner on the content text box saying that expand on chapters 6 and 7, focusing on locational differences. This is correlating to the content that we uploaded in the upload document section. And we're also giving it additional parameters in the text box, allowing me to customize even further the generation of content that I'm going to output from my users. Here's a bit of a framework on the content generation itself and how it correlates into the learning process. I will definitely hand it over to Paul to have him expand it a bit further. Sorry, Paul, it may seem like you are on mute.
Thanks for that. And I'm going to be cheeky and ask you just go back a slide as well.
Yep, absolutely.
So, what we love about this is an example of bringing AI into learning. In this new world that we're living in, we're all prompt engineers, right? We're all using the AI tools to kind of figure out like how they can help us. And so we actually all become prompt engineers because tools can only help you if you prompt them in the right way. And so what we see here is prompt engineering brought into the learning process in the creation of content. And so a lot of the success of learning depends on organizations understanding the importance of prompt engineering and being able to construct good prompts to be able to construct good content. And Sud's shown us that constructing content through AI is now an automated process through the platform. It means that the courses that are generated from the course creation tool are in a platform, in a learning environment. So the learning is ready. Now, once you've got your content there, and that's where we go back to the next slide, so I can cue this up. Once you've got your content in place, then there's a world in front of you of personalization. And this is where it kind of gets very exciting and very interesting and where the world flips compared to where we were just a couple of years ago. This is where one size all finally disappears and where truly personalized learning comes in. Because with your content, you can then take step one, which is to give some kind of pre-assessment for a learner, right? So a learner can take either a quiz that you've set up. The learner could actually create a quiz for themselves based on, their own content generation inside or outside the platform. Or you can use tools like resumes, right? Resumes are the most common format of skills capture for an individual, and everybody's resume is unique. Everybody's resume is very personal. Everybody's resume identifies strengths, and by default, therefore also identifies weaknesses, right? So taking that first step of a pre-assessment allows you to then figure out where that learner is. That figuring out takes place at step two through the AI. So figuring this stuff out in the past, as for anyone who's worked in L&D and skills development knows, has been an incredibly arduous and rudimentary and difficult time because you've had to use kind of standardized rubrics and frameworks and stuff, and they can be messy and yieldy and difficult to work with, and they change very quickly. And as soon as you've changed them, guess what? You have to change them again. Why? Well, because the world's moved on. So that whole beast has been difficult to manage. And folks have really only been able to bite one chunk off the elephant at a time. Well, what we have now is AI with the potential to kind of do a lot of that work on the fly in real time. And anybody who's using tools like ChatGTP will be experiencing this because they're working in dialogue with you. They're kind of figuring you out. They're storing stuff in memory. They're coming back to you. They're learning about you, and then they're presenting answers. Well, we're using that technology, but it's all embedded in the learning environment. So the diagnostic that you can build now against a learner and store it in the learning environment against that course material that's unique to you and your institution, all of that capability is there. So from that diagnostic, I can figure out two things. I can figure out an individual's strengths and I can figure out their weaknesses. And so Sudhanshu will show you some examples in a moment. From that diagnostic, we can then make recommendations. So, hey, you're doing cybersecurity training because you're going to be a consultant in my placement industry, my placement business. Well, if you're a cybersecurity consultant, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses before we place you, before we think about your hourly rate, before we think about the types of engagements we're going to put you on, what are your areas of strengths where we know we can put you, and what are the areas of weaknesses where we know that we need to do some training before we put you out there. So that diagnostic leads to a recommendation that's highly personalized, that gives you content and learning paths, and can generate things like course descriptions, summaries, and abstracts and micro-learning. And Sudhanshu showed you some of the course generation templates, and one of those essentially is a micro-learning template. So being able to generate, micro pieces of learning on the fly. Learning doesn't have to be weeks long. It can be minutes long, right? And a lot of stuff served up 2 and 3 minutes long is usually enough to fill skills gaps. So that's infinitely possible now with AI content generation and with the skills diagnosis that we're seeing here. Once you've got the recommendations, the learner can go through the learning process. And you can also then do things like support the learner, and we'll see that again in a moment in their learning process to help them. A tutor, an instructor may not always be around, so who is there? Well, the AI is there to interact with them and work with them real time. You can do things like grading with AI, and you could do things like proctoring if you're doing high stakes assessment to take somebody through a final exam. And then you're into the final step, and this is really back to Rebecca's initial kickoff with like the importance of data in all of this, which is, the AI is producing a lot of information about learners, storing that, adding to it over time, and that allows you to track. A learner might take a piece of learning that's been recommended, you can store the results, store the tracking. Did they succeed? Are there any more gaps? Do they need to do more? And that then feeds back into a learner profile and ultimately back into the diagnosis. And that just then becomes a virtuous circle of information about the learner to help them with their skills development. All of this within the world of learning, all within their learner process. So Sudhanshu, back to you to give some examples of the personalization and recommendation tools.
Absolutely. Great breakdown, Paul, on the feedback loop and how it is utilized within the learning process through diagnostics and tracking, as well as recommendation. Going on to the next slide. Here's where we're going to see the learner assessment. So the initial part is benchmarking your learner and making sure where they are within their skills level and if there are any skills gaps to identify. Initially, the process starts off with a self-assessment for the learner, and this is a specific assessment where they're going through, I believe, the English language accessibility here. Once the learner completes their assessment and they receive their score, they're then informed with the diagnostics. Here you will see how a diagnostic is displayed to the learner. Once they complete their self-assessment or any sort of benchmarking exam, they will see a breakdown of their skills and strengths. They'll see a brief analysis of exactly what they demonstrated and what areas they need to improve, and additional even recommendations on further analysis. You will also see time spent on the exam, additional parameters and analytics as well, but the main focus here is the analysis given by the AI engine. Here it gives me down a full breakdown of which areas I as a learner have excelled in. For example, reading comprehension is broken down as proficient. However, analogy is broken down as needs improvement. It is also color coded as well, in addition to the words that break down how each level of skill you are at. Furthermore, identifying these skills gaps, the learner is further able to see the recommendations that they're recommended by the AI engine. Here they're able to see, I have these few skills gaps here. What do I need to do to go ahead and tackle these skills gaps? I get to see the recommendations for such as enhancing verbal reasoning, and even furthermore, implementing that skill within my learning environment. Furthermore, reading comprehension and how I can implement that skill in my learning environment as well. On this diagnostic screen, again, I get to see my full skills breakdown, which areas I need to improve, and which steps I can take to make those improvements. Furthermore, following up on the recommendations, you may have seen part of the recommendations were on the bottom of the screen. However, there's more of a visual recommendation on the learner profile. Once they open up their profile, they're greeted with this recommendation screen, and they can see exactly what areas or what courses they need to take. So instead of just recommending skills, the engine also recommends specific courses for them to enroll in. Here they're able to show 4 different courses that they recommended, and even a practice test summary on why they recommended those courses. This correlates back to the diagnostics we saw previously, focusing on what skills areas and skills gaps there are, furthermore, providing recommendations on next steps. Furthermore, another skill summary we see here is another variation of it, is when a learner completes a different self-assessment. This, I believe, is around cybersecurity. And you will see that there's a skill-wise summary and then a multi-topic-wise summary. Initially, you get to see the quiz response. You get to see a number of questions correct, wrong, or incompleted. But the main focus here is a skill-wise and topic-wise summary. This is a full breakdown into which skills areas the learner has expressed strengths in and expressed weaknesses in. It breaks it down exactly into each specific skill and exactly what level of proficiency you have shown in that graph as well, in addition to the topic-wise summary as well. So in addition to the skills gaps, it tells you exactly which topic areas the learner is excelling in and proficient in, as well as what areas they are quite not there yet. Once I go ahead and review this analysis, I get a further diagnostic specific to the learner as well. This is a bit more of a tabulated view of the recommendations. What you saw previously is another variation of it. We have a few different templates that you're able to utilize for the skills display. Here again, the learner submitted a self-assessment, and they're able to see a full specific summary on that specific assessment. Here they get to see again the skills that they showed strengths in, and a quick analysis from the AI summary, preparedness and learning paths that the AI recommends they take, and again, further skills assessment for them as well, such as incident response process. They demonstrated proficiency of novice with a difficulty level on the quiz as medium. Further skills they also recommended for this learner is that they are advanced in multi-factor authentication and data breach understanding. I, as a learner, can go ahead and correlate all this information, see what areas I need to excel in, and exactly where I demonstrated strong skills in this specific assessment, further allowing me to diagnose exactly my learning path and personalizing my improvements as well. Here again is another recommendation engine. Again, I, as open a learner profile, I get to see a full breakdown as where I am in my learning path and where I am in my proficiency. Here I get to see, as you can see, a quick overview of my learning credentials, name, email, essential numbers that are needed. And then you get to see a skill set summary. Here again, the skills that we saw populated previously through the self-assessments and diagnostics are populated here on my profile. Again, they are color-coded and they're labeled in level of proficiency as well. So again, each color represents a different level of proficiency. If there was a green skill there, that would mean I was proficient. Yellow skill means there's some improvement. And then gray means that there's still quite a bit of improvement needed on that area as well. As I complete assessments, as I complete diagnostics, the skills will populate further, and my recommendations additionally will populate further as well. As we saw previously, there were some few recommendations, and we saw some skills populate. As I continue these assessments, my recommendations will populate further, and my skills will continue to populate further as well. In addition to skills gaps that I needed will improve as well. What we have concluded so far is the AI course generator and the skills pro summary. That covers exactly how you can create content and how you can build out learning paths. But then there's a third part, which is when your learners are going through your learning paths and their learning journey, how do they receive support? Here, what you're seeing is the learner assistance. This is a 24/7 support for learners around the clock to ask them anything around the platform. So it's essentially called an Ask Me Anything feature in the platform, and it's available to all learners at any aspect of their learning journey. What they're able to utilize with this tool is able to ask it any questions related to its learning journey or their learning path. You can see that this learner asked a specific question on what actions can I take if an unexpected email arrives. After reviewing the course materials specific on the platform, the learner receives an AI overview of exactly what they can do. It gave me a step-by-step breakdown on what I can do with that email, and it even referenced specific learning materials in my learning courses where that information was withdrawn from. This is one specific question a learner asked in that learning environment. However, there's several other questions that you can ask as well. This is not limited to a specific industry or a specific environment. As we see that there's some of our clients or some of our use cases, there are several different industries that utilize this learning tool. For example, we have an additional tool here, or additional question here, which is an example of malware attack. Previously, we saw a process email. This is more of a specific informational question. Here it asks, what is an example of a malware attack? It gave me an AI overview example, and it even referenced specific materials in my learning on where I can find specific information as well. I, as a professional, am able to utilize this in my day-to-day job or even in my learning processes. So you're not limited to your learning environment. You're able to utilize these reference materials in your day-to-day work environment as well. Is there anything you wanted to add on these two learning assistants, Paul?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the really great summary there, Sudhanshu. I think
Absolutely.
at this point we've established the principles. So the three principles of the use of AI in learning, brought into learning, is the generation of content, the recommendation and learner diagnosis, and then thirdly, the learner assistance. And I think where we're going with this and where you were going with that is that learning is usually a formalish process in a company. ultimately, it's all about turning that into impact and results for the business and for your own customers. So a couple of other great use cases. So we've covered a manufacturing use case, we covered a more academic skills-based use case, and then we've covered the cyber security use case. A fourth use case would be a customer we have who is using the technology to do training for installation for window coverings. So this is a very, practical application in a domestic setting. So people who are, in their customers' homes installing, for example, blind and coverage, and both as a, in the pre-sales process and the pro-sales and post-sales process and the installation process, they may need a lot of help and support, particularly with quite technical stuff, right? If you think about the world, for example, of window coverings, there are an infinite number out there, even from the same manufacturer. There may be, thousands of different models over, many, many years and decades. And just finding a way to get help with that. So can this particular blind be replaced that was manufactured 20 years ago? That's very, very proprietary, and a lot of business information is very proprietary. You can go out there, you can try it now if you like. You can go onto ChatGTP and you can ask it about window coverings. It's going to do a reasonable job, but it's going to be pretty broad and it's going to be non-specific. And so what all businesses need to do and want to do is get to their specific proprietary information. And that proprietary information is normally gathered in one place by that business. It's sometimes shared with the world, but it's not shared with the world in the way that their employees might need to quiz it and use it and interact with it. So what we're seeing is businesses creating a walled garden with their content, with their information. In this case, it would be maybe years and years of installation manuals put together in a central repository and used not only to train, but then whilst the installer is on the job, they can then use this tool to quiz. Now, in the past, you could use search, and search could sometimes be effective, but we all know that the reality of search, what it did was it would list 1,000 results, and then you had to kind of figure it out. What we know is the reality with generative AI is if you point it at the right content, it will find the right thing and present that back to you. So, with really technical, quite proprietary things like blind installation, can it find the name of a specific blind manufactured 23 years ago, only in Canada, not in the United States? Not going to find that on the internet, right? ChatGTP is not going to find that generically. So working with proprietary information in a walled garden on a platform and then allowing your installation teams to work with that information in a very targeted way is the way that we see the industries moving forward. So that fourth use case, I think, is probably the most impactful because if you remember early on in our presentation, I spoke about the way that Edrevel is thinking about every customer has its own unique requirements. What we are thinking through here is how one specific company has unique requirements and how we can deliver against those. So the technology gives us tremendous potential to not only help learners personalize, but also to help companies do their very specific, unique company-specific things. So with that, I think we'll stop there. So first of all, Rebecca, thank you so much for the industry outlook. Thinking about skills, thinking about AI and developing skills, and thinking about the use of data. Thank you for the emphasis on impact. I think with the study that we looked at with Britannia Manufacturing, we really focused down on that. And then thinking about how you leverage AI within learning, we thought about three things, which is using AI to generate content, using AI deliver recommendations and personalized learning. And then thirdly, how do you use AI to support the learner? I hope this has been useful. I hope we've delivered some frameworks for thinking and some useful use cases and ultimately ways to be strategic in your business. So Nikki, are there any questions for us just to wrap up on?
Yes, Paul, we do have questions. I'll start here. First, there's a question for Rebecca. Rebecca, as we head into ATD 2025, what are some of the key L&D trends or challenges you're expecting to see take center stage?
No, sure. Thank you. Thank you, Nikki, for that question. Yes, as we approach this realm of AI integration, personalization at scale, and data-driven decision making and future-ready skill development are like some of the topics that I see that are being underscored at ATD with their future readiness track, and also their measurement and evaluation. That'll be good to look into for ROI sessions. So, how do we translate these conference insights into actionable strategies would be to make sure we engage with practical workshops, to learn from. And then so we know what is upcoming and we are able to adapt, as well as leverage the tools, platforms, technology to build the right systems to be able to be adaptive, like Edrevel, that is capable to quickly match the trends and the evolutions that's happening in L&D. And that also will be the backbone for the culture of continuous learning, to be open to experimentation with your teams, learn back and forth and see how you can encourage engagement and continuous learning. So with these three blocks, I think it would be really helpful to keep advancing L&D in your teams.
Great, thank you. All right. So, Paul, there are two questions. One around on the LinkedIn, where Gabriela just says, this sounds like learner-driven training process. So do you want to give a comment on that? And then we'll take the next question as well.
Yeah, and I'll be quite brief. I think that's spot on, right? And I think that's the 180-degree flip we see with leveraging AI. So really the models of the past, of the last 25 years, have been, one size fits all, essentially top down. No matter how hard we all tried to personalize learning, it was really hard to do it. And ultimately everybody was taking a kind of one size fits all approach. But what's happened now is that model's flipped because essentially the learner can drive their own learning. You can see a time where, it's not, okay, I publish a bunch of courses and a bunch of people come and learn against them. It's a learner comes into a place, runs a diagnosis, and then any type of content is served up against that learner. So, um, you can see a time where it's truly learner driven because the technology is adapting everything that's out there, whether it's content, whether it's references on the internet, whether it's handbooks, whatever it might be, it's adapting any type of content to learn a question and learn a need and serving it up to them. So I think that's an amazing point that question made.
Right. So just an extension to that, from your experience, another question that's asked from your experience, why is L&D no longer just a support function, but a core level for business strategy and transformation today?
Yeah, because Rebecca hit on it just then. She talked about a culture of continuous learning, and any modern company needs a culture of continuous learning. Skills get outdated extremely fast. The landscape for skills has changed dramatically over the last decade or so, and so L&D has to be a strategic function in the business. The curiosity of your staff and employees, you have to enable them as learners, and you have to foster a culture of constant curiosity. So being able to make curiosity and learning core in your business, so you can go deliver results for your customers. It's hard, but the technology we have here, the use of AI, it actually gives us the promise of doing that and reduces the barriers to doing that.
All right, great. So we'll have the next question for Sudhanshu. So there's a question, Jeevan, I think will be great for the forum. So any real world use cases or success stories where Edrevel has helped organizations bridge the skill gap or improve learning outcomes at scale?
Great question. Um, yeah, thinking about several real world cases that we have with our clients, a lot of them are on our website, listed as case studies. The first one that comes to mind is the one that we mentioned earlier in this presentation, was Britannia. This is a huge company, as Paul mentioned, several facilities, a huge workforce, and we are, again, like Paul mentioned, just very early in the stages, uh, willing to build out the initial product, the initial proof, and scaling it from there. What we're doing is building that kiosk like we saw earlier, identifying skills gaps for the workforce that are in the factory floor, seeing exactly how they can improve, give them the trainings that they require directly in that kiosk area as well, and bridging those skills gaps that are there. This is something that, again, like we mentioned, is on just a couple of the facilities right now, and it's going to grow at a very large scale on the international level that Britannia is. And definitely, if Paul, you wanted to add onto this as well, as this is the case study that you identified, I believe Britannia is the best example to show that the level of scale that we're achieving with this skills gap.
Yeah, second one, thanks for that, Sudhanshu. And a second one would be a very large call center service organization that we work with. Again, they're a large regional, but they have an international presence, and they have more than 30,000 call center workers. And we have implemented large-scale learning and development programs along the same lines, but obviously a call center is a different type of workplace to a manufacturing plant, right? It's got some similarities and it's got some differences. The similarities are the scale, the need for just-in-time education and training. But call centers are really more knowledge bank based. Call center workers are typically dipping into knowledge banks in real time, having to think through real-time questions from people on a telephone call or on a chat. In many cases, those service assistants are multitasking between telephone and chat. And so being able to give them access to knowledge, and then also being able to train them on new areas, new product knowledge, is super important for the quality of service, and also the results for the customers, who are using the service, and also the result of the customers employing the call center for their own business. So a slightly different use case, but similar kinds of challenges with scale. And the one thing we'd say, and from our own learnings and from what we've experienced, is start small. So the Britannia example that you saw earlier, that started small in Britannia terms with a couple of thousand employees, but now is scaling. Once you've proved it with a smaller subset in a pilot, then scale very fast, right? The real trick with innovation is, first of all, prove it, make sure it works, and then when you're comfortable it works, you can scale it to tens of thousands very quickly. But you have to know it works with your initial group.
Great. I think with that, those are the questions we had today. So thank you all for joining us today. We hope the session gave you practical insights into how AI is reshaping learning and development. A special thanks to our speakers for their time and expertise, and the audience who patiently listen and have been part of this webinar today. We're back with our next webinar on May 12th, where we dive deeper into AI native tools and drive measurable learning outcomes. And we look forward to seeing you all there. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Sad. And thank you, everyone else, for joining us today.
Thank you.
You,
Thanks
thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you, everyone.